Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. So nice to have you back this week. I hope you all have had a great week. I hope it was filled with family and friends and safety. Still got COVID going on. Can't be too safe, but I hope you all are well. And if you are unwell, that's okay too. It's okay to be a little bit unwell sometimes, but I hope you're getting through it and know that I've got your back and many others have your back as well. You're not alone. So if you had a bad week, you're not alone. Hope things start looking up for you soon. So, of course, what I'm going to talk about this week is what has just happened a few days ago. I'm just going to expand on my thoughts on the recent Apple event, where it's like, oh yeah, here's some AirPods, here's a new pricing tier for something. New MacBook Pro! That's basically how the event went. And I'm only going to touch on, the things before the MacBook Pro unveiling, new MacBook Pro 14-inch and 16-inch unveiling, just for a minute. New AirPods, neat. I mean, there's some cool technology there, spatial audio, and I thought the idea of real-time equalization to individuals' ears and individual hearing was pretty neat. I'm not a huge fan. Call me old school. I know that. So I have this suspicion that Jonathan Morrison has like a low-key kind of I don't know what to call it. He probably thinks I'm full of crap, so to speak. I've talked to him a couple times. I don't know if he's ever going to come on the show, but him and I have had some disagreements, very brief, not like we know each other personally, but disagreements on kind of Apple Audio and AirPods Max and AirPods and just Apple's approach to audio. And I don't disagree that the psychoacoustic technology is really neat, but for instance, I'm old school and I'm kind of purist. I would just like there to be options for pure, unfiltered audio going through an audio jack into headphones, for instance, without DSP, without processing, without converting to 16-bit, 24-bit, or even up to lossless audio going through codecs. I just want unfiltered, like from a DAC straight to the headphones. And apparently Jonathan thinks, and I'm not sounding like I'm mean towards Jonathan. I have no ill will towards Jonathan at all. I'm using him as an example for this kind of sort of mindset where we just have these differing opinions. Basically, stressing about having pure audio input through a pair of $550 headphones is basically running a car on gasoline, where the new technology is like EV. It basically saying that it's ancient, old school to want pure audio through wires to your headphones. And I'm just thinking for like music creation and content creation and people mixing audio, I'm not saying it can't be done with the lag that Bluetooth or wireless audio streaming introduces. I'm just saying if you work with audio a lot, there's still a lot of engineers out there who just want pure uncolored audio coming into their ears. And surely, speaking of psychoacoustics, like I said, I like the idea of psychoacoustics, but man, just call me old-fashioned with stereo. A good stereo mix. To me, there's nothing that can there's nothing that can fake a good mix. And I'm not saying that spatial audio is faking a good mix. No, because things are mixed now for spatial audio. I'm just old school, and then that I think maybe not everything should be mixed to spatial audio right now, not every single thing. But on the flip side, I think it's a cool option too. I'm being very confusing, I know. I just that's a good way to kind of sum it up. The new AirPods and everything like that. I just have mixed feelings about psychoacoustics. That's all. Just mixed feelings. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I think it's just cool that you have both options. But I have mixed feelings about psychoacoustics. Anyways, that's not what I wanted to talk mainly about in this show. And I think I'll have to expand more upon the MacBook Pro announcement in the next segment, because I'm looking at my little ticker going by here and I see that in the next, I don't know, a few seconds here, what time is it? Well, I got time. I'll start with the MacBook Pro. So basically, on the surface level, Apple has performed a shocker as far as recent memory of Apple is concerned, and they've listened to consumer feedback. They've given us ports back, HDMI ports, we have Type-C ports, we have a headphone jack, MagSafe is back, we have SD card readers. Ports are back. The useful ports that pros need are back, and that's always been my complaint with MacBook Pros is you got the word pro on there, but if you're a pro photographer, pro videographer, and you need to dump data quickly to your laptop, you need a dongle if you wanted to do that with a MacBook Pro. So why is pro in the name? Yes, there's pro features, the display is pro, and there's other things that are about it that are pro, quote unquote, but like creature comforts are not there. Display outputs native to the display ports and or HDMI output native from the laptop, that's not there. You needed dongles or Type-C to HDMI, Type-C to DisplayPort, whatever. Now we have a port selection. And that's not all. The new MacBook Pros are amazing. I want one. I can't afford one. I probably won't buy one anytime soon. Still love my first gen M1 MacBook Pro. But let's talk about more about my thoughts on the new MacBook Pros coming up. You're listening to Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger. GeekTherapyRadio.com for more information. You can email me directly also, johnny@geektherapyradio.com. Grab the podcast. If you're just listening to this on the radio, you can grab the podcasts in your favorite podcast app. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for the Geek Therapy Radio podcast. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme across all platforms, and that's how you know you've got me. You can also look for the red, white, and black color scheme if you type Geek Therapy Radio into all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all that good stuff. Okay, so let's talk more about the MacBook Pros. I talked in the last segment, towards the last segment, that we have ports back. We don't have a ton of ports, but I am not really nitpicking at this point. I am just happy that we have a port selection again on a Pro device, especially, I know a lot of people are excited about MagSafe, but especially that we have an SD card reader again, and a fast SD card reader, so that photographers and videographers, a lot of them still use, a lot of them use SD cards, and the SD card protocol is getting faster and faster. I am not sure, as of just recording right now, not looking at it, if the SD card port on the new MacBook Pros are the new like ultra fast protocol. I forget what the protocol's called, but the thing is, I don't think it matters very much. I wouldn't be surprised if the new MacBooks do have that ultra-fast protocol, because as of recording right now, there really aren't many cameras, if any at all, that use the brand new cutting-edge ultra-fast SD card protocol. So it's not a heartbreaker if the new MacBook Pros don't have it. I'm sure they're still using a very fast connection. You're probably talking, 100 megabit. Can I say gigabit connection with an SD card? You're probably going to be able to utilize the maximum speed of all standard SD cards out there. So, the SD cards I use can transfer at 100 megabytes a second. I mean, at like the fastest for the cards I used. I'm sure the new MacBook Pros can use that. And the newest protocol for SD cards that is ultra super fast, it's all backwards compatible anyway. So I am most happy for that SD card slot on the new MacBook Pros, but at the same time, I'm not worried about kind of future or past compatibility, because it's going to cover the gamut. That's what I think. Anyways, just happy to have it. And if it was at USB 2.0 speeds, I'd be like, why? This is going to be super super fun, offloading a 60 gigabyte raw video file at 13 megabytes per second or whatever, if that, on USB 2.0 protocol. Anyways, so new webcam, 1080p, That's really cool. Improved microphones, improved speakers. That's all just kind of icing on the cake. I've demonstrated in a video in the past the microphone quality, and I've recorded an entire podcast using the built-in microphone with this first generation 13-inch MacBook Pro, and it's wonderful. So the fact that microphones get better and the speakers get better, awesome. The fact that we have ports, amazing. The fact that we have MagSafe, awesome. The fact that it can still charge over Type-C, wonderful. That's all really cool. The big news, obviously, isn't just the new port selection or even the notch that I will get to. Put a pin in that. I do want to talk about the notch, and I will. But obviously, the biggest news is the next generation of M1 processors. So M1 Pro and M1 Max. That has me jonesing hard for, like, my ideal MacBook Pro now would be the 16-inch, and it would have the M1 Max with the maximum amount of cores and maximum amount of GPU cores and 64 gigabytes of unified RAM. And I could care less really about the built-in storage. Like 512 would be fine with me because I'm always using external hard drives and solid-state drives all the time anyway, so 512 is fine. I've been perfectly happy with 512 on my first-gen M1 MacBook Pro here. It hasn't been an issue. Always got hard drives dongled. But yeah, the iteration I want, the 16-inch, is like $3,900 is the one I would have, which means I'm not spending my own money on that. I don't know if I'll ever get a configuration, my dream configuration, 64 gigs of unified memory, the top spec M1 Max chip. What I wanted to mention, and I kind of on that note, I mentioned this on Twitter, is that the current generation M1 Mac Pro, the GPU side of things, at least the 8-core GPU side, because the lower grade Silicon gets the 7-core GPU in the first gen M1, but the 8-core GPU with 8 gigs of unified RAM is roughly equivalent to the performance of a GTX, I believe it's 1650 Ti, or a 1650, possibly a 1660, but it's thereabouts. It's kind of that ballpark. And the new M1 Pro and M1 Max goes all the way up to a rough equivalent, as of now, to RTX 3080. RTX 3080 in a laptop that consumes a fraction amount of power and has access to up to, theoretically, 64 gigs of unified memory. That's pure insanity. For the less kind of tech savvy, you're like, why are you freaking out about that, man? All this mumbo jumbo you're mentioning. I edit video all the time. And what's mind-boggling about this is, like I said, I'm on the first generation M1 MacBook Pro with only 8 gigabytes of RAM. I wouldn't pick up a high-spec laptop of any other manufacturer with only 8 gigabytes of RAM, but 8 gigabytes of unified, and just everything that's going on efficiently behind the scenes on this MacBook Pro is just sorcery. How they're able to get such good performance out of 8 gigabytes of unified RAM in an 8-core GPU. For instance, I'm working on a project right now flawlessly. It's a 4K project, completely uncompressed. My timeline is uncompressed, HDR, 4K straight out of our videographer John D's. He has a couple of Sony's, FX6 and an FX9, and I'm just editing raw off of there. And I'm using the codec ProRes, and it's just 4K, flawless, never skips a beat. It's just completely buttery smooth, and that's on my first gen M1 with 8 gigs of unified RAM and an 8-core GPU. Can you imagine? I would imagine, and I can't speak to any solid proof of this yet because nobody, as of recording, has a review unit to test this on, or if they do, they're still under an embargo and can't say anything about it. I'm fully predicting 8K. I'm predicting at least 8K 60 and then 12K 30 editing, no problem, on the top spec, like M1 Max for sure. That's what I'm predicting. I'm predicting that you could do a 12K 24 frame per second project, uncompressed, HDR, no problem on an M1 Max. You can technically, on the first gen M1 that I have right now, you can edit 4K. I mean, you can technically edit 4K 24 frames a second, at least, on the first generation M1. But the fact that we know, again, since no one's tested this as of recording, we know that we have a good inclination that 8K and 12K rendering at up to 60 frames per second, 8K especially, I think that's going to be possible. And that's not even counting all the things you can do, in DaVinci Resolve and Fusion, or all the 3D rendering you can do in other programs. That's going to be effortless on these new laptops, and at a fraction of the wattage. I was kind of surprised to see Apple mention that, hey, other laptops can perform similarly to these new chips, but they consume like 10 times the amount of power versus M1 Pro and M1 Max, and even M1 for that matter. I was like, wow, you actually have mentioned that other products can perform similarly, with the caveat that they consume way exponentially more wattage, that the performance per watt on M1, M1 Pro, and M1 Max is really where the bread and butter is at, and I fully agree. I love using my M1 MacBook Pro here in my solar-powered studio because it just sips electricity, especially even when, where did I mention this? Even when it's charging, like if I have 30% battery and I plug it in to charge at full strength and I'm rendering in DaVinci Resolve using 4K and all that kind of stuff, it only pulls like 70 watts out of the wall while it's charging. And then when it's just sitting there kind of cruising along, it's like 40 watts. It's absolutely crazy. More Geek Therapy Radio coming up. I'm not done with the MacBook Pro, new MacBook Pros. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, geektherapyradio.com for more information. And if you're listening to this on the radio, you grab the podcast in your favorite podcast player, no matter what it is. Just search for Geek Therapy Radio. Look for the red, white, and black color scheme across the podcast platforms and all social media platforms and YouTube. And that's how you know you've got Geek Therapy Radio. All right, back to the newly announced MacBook Pros with the M1 Pro and M1 Max, and the 14-inch and 16-inch variants. These things are expensive. They start at around $2,000. I don't think anybody's surprised by that. But again, something that I've mentioned with the first generation M1, and one of the reasons why I pulled the trigger to get a first generation M1 is I felt that the value proposition was finally there. That when I spent, how much was this laptop in total? I think total, like with tax, I think it was like $1,600 for this thing. No buyer's remorse. It's been wonderful. It's a workhorse. I use it almost every single day. I'm using it to record this podcast right now. The fan noise you hear in the background is my Asus Zephyrus G14. If you do hear any fan noise, it's downloading a gigantic flight simulator update. Hopefully the update that includes, if I'm not mistaken, DirectX 12 support? I have to double check on that. But anyways, yeah, you're not hearing any fan noise from the M1. It just, I can't, I think I've heard the fan noise spin up once, like rendering something out and emulating something, and it was just, the fans don't spin on here, and it's so quick. The performance per watt is just amazing, and the value proposition is there, to get back on track with what I started this segment with. The value proposition is there because for $1,200, whatever the M1, the first gen M1 MacBook Pro starts at, you are getting performance very similar to, if not better than, similarly priced $1,200 notebooks on the Windows side. The value proposition was there, whereas in the past, powered by Intel chips and running AMD Radeon graphics, you were spending you were paying the Apple tax, quote unquote, for, on paper, less performance, but you were paying more money. And you didn't even have ports. You didn't even have ports. Don't get me started on that. We've beaten that dead horse over and over. Now the value proposition is there. So if you're looking for a 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook Pro with either the M1 Pro processor, M1 Max, yes, they're expensive, the Macs are worth it again. They weren't worth it, in my opinion, for a very long time. They weren't worth it if your workload was mainly Windows based. Obviously, there was no reason to go Mac if everything you did was within Windows. For one thing, the price of admission was very high, and you'd have to be turning to use a proprietary software on the MacBook. So the value proposition just wasn't there. But now it is. Now it is. A quick side note, that's one of the reasons why I decided to learn my video editing program, DaVinci Resolve, learn it in earnest. Because DaVinci Resolve works on Windows, works in Mac OS, and works on Linux. So I knew that no matter what device I was working on, I could just open up DaVinci Resolve project and be on my way. Not so with Premiere or Final Cut. Obviously, Final Cut is only Mac. Premiere works on Windows and Mac, and DaVinci Resolve works on Mac, Windows, and Linux. So anyways, back to kind of the value proposition and the 14-inch and 16-inch Macs. The new M1 chips are mind-boggling. And it's even more mind-boggling when you realize we haven't even seen the desktop, other than the Mac Mini. Like, we haven't seen any Mac Pros or anything like that yet. And by all accounts, what the high-powered Mac desktops are going to be, it's going to be at least 4 M1 Max with an X dies on one chip. One SoC with at least 4, if not more, M1 Max processors. And that's insane. Right now, God freaking knows what the memory situation, unified memory situation, is going to be on the desktop side. Right now, I think the current Mac Pros, you can go up to like 1.2 or 1.4 thereabouts of DDR4 RAM. Not even Marques Brownlee, not even MKBHD uses that much. I think he had a video demonstrating it, but there are few and far between people, even like the top YouTube creators, that would ever saturate 1.2 terabytes of RAM, which is more RAM than a lot of people have storage in their computers anyways. So that's the question for me is, okay, so M1 Pro, M1 Max that you can configure for up to 64 gigabytes of unified RAM, which, believe me, if the common person with a workstation or video editor, 64 gigs of unified RAM is, most people would still never saturate even half of that, even to make really good content. But on the desktop side, Mac Pro, let's say you have 4 M1 Max chips together on one die, and it's the outgoing can Intel-based systems can use up to 1.2 or whatever terabytes of RAM. What about unified RAM now with M1 on the desktop side of things? Could you freaking imagine a terabyte of unified RAM on a desktop variant of M1? It beggars belief. It simply beggars belief. Apple, I will be the first to hold Apple to the flames, especially 2018 and Throttlegate and all that stuff. I'm the first because I own Apple products. And I kind of use both, and I somebody has to keep, if you're listening to Apple, news and opinion, somebody has to keep it level. So I will criticize Apple everywhere Apple deserves criticism. But regarding M1, they have changed the game, and that's not an understatement. The rest of the industry is going to be playing catch-up. A lot of the industry is going to be playing catch-up with the M1 chips and the switch to ARM and processors that are so efficient and so powerful, proprietary silicon and all that good stuff. I mean, I believe AMD is working on it, if I'm not mistaken, and NVIDIA possibly. That Windows is shaking in their boots. That Intel's shaking in their boots. So what are we going to do? There's more variables on the Windows side. Windows is not a closed garden like Apple is. It's one reason why Apple can be so efficient and make chips and make software that runs so optimized on their custom ARM silicon, is that it's such a closed walled garden. Everything is very proprietary, so they can be very efficient with it and make very powerful products and make a very smooth experience I tried AirDrop, by the way, the other day for the first time, and it blew my mind. I know you're listening to this. We've had AirDrop for years, bro. Yeah, well, I hadn't used it until recently. I had my M1 at a filming, and the subject of the film was using his new iPhone to film a bunch of stuff. He's like, let me send you these files. Like, okay, well, I don't have a lightning cable, or I don't have necessary to. He's like, no, AirDrop, bro. You've got an Apple. I was like, oh yeah. So he just like bloop bloop instantly, and it was fast. It was fast transferring these files. It was crazy. Anyways, walled garden allows you to do things like that and have very tight controls over efficiency and the user experience. So back to holding Apple to the flame for some things. The notch. Let's talk about the notch on the new MacBook Pros. I have seen much to do about this notch across Twitter and other social media. People scratching their heads, their mind boggle. A notch on a laptop? Are you kidding me, Apple? What are you thinking? Da 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 da. And I'm like, look, whoa. It's like they just announced such game-changing technologies, and they brought back the ports you asked for, and they're about to blow everything else out of the water in terms of performance per watt. Like, we have everything we ever wanted out of a MacBook Pro now. But the notch? I don't think the notch bears that much negative scrutiny. I don't think it deserves it, and I'll tell you why now. Because the notch exists within the taskbar, the top menu bar itself. It's not like it's sitting down in there in usable screen real estate. It's within the taskbar up there on a Mac. And I'm like, okay, that's fine with me. You can just put the little tiny icons around the notch, and that's just what it's going to do. If you have so many icons that, well, whatever, you get my point. The notch is in the taskbar. It's not sitting there in the middle of the desktop. That, and I don't know how many people listening to this are aware of this. Hopefully I am able to reveal some info to some of you at least. Below the notch, that aspect ratio below the notch is 16:10. So you're not losing anything. You still have all the same ratio that you used to have, 16:10. It's 16:10 below the notch. Everything alongside the notch on top there is just extra. You're not going to really be using it, and there's not a whole lot of software that it's going to affect, is what I'm saying. It's 16:9 ratio below the notch. Everything above it is just extra for developers to kind of utilize how they want to utilize, but it's not going to affect most programs. The notch is such a minor thing. It's just, in my opinion, it's such a minor thing. For everything else we got, everything else that Apple gave us. Granted, some of it is like giving it back. It never should have gone away. And the touch bar is gone. Praise the Lord. Don't go anywhere. We have physical function keys again. Hallelujah. Oh, man. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio if you're listening to the radio. If you listen to the podcast, that was just a seamless transition. Listening to the radio, God knows what you heard in the last 5 minutes. I don't control that, what happens in the commercial breaks, but welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. The MacBook Pro has gotten rid of the touch bar again. Oh, thank you. We have physical controls back. But that begs another question now. Developers were, I guess it's not going to be that big of an issue. I'm answering my own question. Developers weren't really on board with the touch bar to begin with. Like, there were, to my knowledge, in my use case scenario, there were a few, Mac OS programs that used the touch bar, and the OS itself used the touch bar for like volume and brightness and screenshots and things like that. Nothing that couldn't be done with a function key press in a physical button. But anyways, it was kind of flashy and it looks kind of nice, and if you were in Final Cut or if you were in GarageBand and things, you could use the touch bar for some things, and it's like, it wasn't that useful. At least in my case, it was not that useful. As a content creator, I only ever had to interact with a touch bar to change screen brightness or volume or something like that. And even that, half the time I was just clicking up in the controls on the top of the taskbar to do those things. I really didn't use the touch bar very much. And every freaking day I was using this thing, I was like, please, why can't these be physical buttons again? They're like, oh, well, we gave you a physical escape key. That's important for programmers and other users. Great. I mean, that is cool, don't get me wrong, but they brought back physical controls and ports and MagSafe. They gave us so much. So to my point in the past segment, the notch is not a big deal. Within that notch is a better webcam finally. It's not a 720p garbage unit. It's a 1080p, much improved camera within that notch. Like there's been so much improvement and so much listening to consumer feedback with the new MacBook Pros that it's like, why to nitpick on the notch is so. It's just that it's a nitpick. Everything else is great. Everything else is borderline perfect. Everything else is exactly what we wanted. But a notch is getting the focus. It's almost like, how can I describe this? If you're looking at a model, a person, like a woman or a guy, depending on your cup of tea, and they're just perfect. They're very handsome or they're very beautiful, but they have a mole, a beauty mark. We call it a beauty mark. You're going to notice the imperfections, and the imperfections kind of make it more beautiful, make the model more beautiful. And I think similarly, I'm not saying that the notch in the new MacBook Pros make the MacBook Pro more beautiful. I don't think it does anything. I don't think it does anything to detract from the situation. And to have been given all these upgrades and improvements and everything we've asked for in the next generation of M1 chips, and then dwell on the notch is kind of weird to me. I mean, I get it. Everything's so perfect that the one flaw kind of glares. I get if it's your opinion that it's a flaw, it kind of glares at you, but I still think, here's my nitpick. If I were to nitpick, there's two nitpicks. As I'm looking at my M1 right here that I'm using, MacBook Pro, 13-inch MacBook Pro, I would not be adverse to Apple refining the CNCing, the milling of this recycled aluminum case right below the touchpad, and y'all know what I'm talking about. The notch to open the lid that's cut out into the aluminum. Those are sharp. How many of you listening to me right now have actually, minorly injured yourself on these sharp bezels and bevels of the MacBook Pro aluminum? It doesn't give, and it's sharp. I'm poking them right now. Each kind of side, they're pointy and they're sharp. And even the edge of the palm pad on the bottom beneath the keyboard, the sides of this laptop, they're sharp edges. They're 90-degree angles out of milled aluminum. It doesn't give. I think that Apple could, at least at the very bare minimum, round off these little kind of cuts in the screen lifting bezel that's in the base of the laptop, that little notch in there. Round that off a little bit. That's like one of those little things. It's kind of a nitpick, but like, it hurts. I'm running my thumb over it. It's indenting my thumb. That's a thing. I mean, that's a valid complaint, I think, is kind of soften up these edges, the sharp edges around the laptop. And again, I know there's people listening. They're like, totally, bro. Totally. I have totally nailed myself on the edges of the MacBook, and it doesn't give, and it hurts, and it's left a bruise or even drawn blood. So next MacBook Pros, I think you should bevel some of these sharp edges off a little bit. What was my other nitpick? So, yeah, the other one was kind of minor, and it has to do with the camera. I was happy to see 1080p, and happy that it's a decent 1080p camera. I was kind of thinking, let me set this up a little bit. I've asked this question on here and on my YouTube channel, why aren't laptop cameras better than they are, given how great cell phone cameras are? I've made the argument that if you took the camera from like an iPhone 4S and popped it into almost any laptop, even a MacBook Pro, you would have arguably the best webcam that's ever been put into a laptop. As Apple says with the new 1080p webcam, they say this is the best webcam that's ever been in a Mac. Okay, that's like saying this turd with a chocolate chip in it is the best tasting turd we've ever made. It's a turd with a chocolate chip in it. So anyway, like the cameras on MacBooks and MacBook Pro have been turds. And now it's a 1080. I'm not saying it's a 1080p turd. It's a good camera. By the looks of it, it looks like a good camera. But I still nitpick on this. The reason why I've been explained that webcams on laptops haven't been very great is because the webcam, sorry, my phone's beeping at me. film shoot to get to. The reason is the webcams on most laptops were using the USB protocol. So there was only so much you could do with the USB protocol in terms of image quality and transfer speeds, and most of it was like USB 2.0, so you're talking like 11 megabytes per second thereabouts, or it wasn't a lot of bandwidth to work with. And the reason why cameras and phones were so spectacular, up to and including 8K in some devices, is that the phones and cameras don't use USB protocol because it's all integrated system on chip. You had a direct connection to the image processor on the die itself, on the CPU itself. There was no other protocol to go through. It was direct, express to the system on chip. So you had all that bandwidth just pumping straight to the image processor. Not the case with most laptops. You were using a USB protocol. And I thought that by the time we got to M1 in this integrated system on a chip, that we could then finally have webcams pumping straight to the image processor baked into the die. That you wouldn't be using USB 2.0, you wouldn't be using SATA, you wouldn't be using anything like that. You'd be going straight to the die. Is that the case right now? I don't know. I honestly don't know if Mac webcams are still using a USB protocol or what they're using. Are they using an Express protocol? But I thought for sure Apple making their own M1 chips, own system on chips, that the camera could be therefore as good as a smartphone camera, because now you'd be pumping the imaging straight through to the image processor. We'll see. I mean, a 4K camera on a laptop's kind of overkill, but I think a wonderful 1080p camera or even a 1440p with really good glass, using a really good smartphone camera, I don't think that's out of the question. Maybe we'll see it one day. Maybe we won't. Was there something else I wanted to mention? Time's running out, so I'll mention the most important thing, and then I'll kick myself if I forget something else. The most important thing is to know that you are worthy of love. You are worthy of giving love, and you are worthy of receiving love, and you are worthy of your own self-respect. Lean into your geek thing. Embrace your geek thing. And I'll talk to you next time on Geek Therapy Radio. Take care. Have a great week. Geek out. If you'd like to sponsor Geek Therapy Radio, just go to geektherapyradio.com and let's talk.